You know how it is when it's International Women's Day. Then they remember that there's a woman in the team who should be taking the lead.
What's remember?
I'm not going to shy away from it, Chamberlain. And I'm really delighted to be making this introduction of our next guest. She is Dr. Blessing Enakimo. She's the Chief Executive Officer of Blay Global and Director of Events Brevity Anderson. She joins us via Zoom from Kent in the United Kingdom. Good morning, Dr. Enakimo. I hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly. Welcome to Sunrise Daily and happy International Women's Day.
Happy International Women's Day to you too. Thanks for having me.
Well, thank you so much for joining us. Well, I'm looking at this year's theme and I'm looking at all that you two have done over the years. This year's theme is Invest in Women, Accelerate Progress. For you and where you stand, how do you connect with this theme?
It's an exciting theme, I think, and it's good to see a positive recognition in the theme for once on International Women's Day. For me, I think it's the truth in it that says invest in women, accelerate progress. Because the truth is, if you do want to accelerate progress in any industry, in any nation, the key is to invest in women. And I'm glad that the United Nations has recognized that. So for me, I'm glad, and I stand with it.
How have you been able to connect with this? I mean, you say that this is something that is a truth. I'm sure you're saying this from perhaps personal experience. Can you share with us some insights into how you come to the conclusion that this is in fact a truth?
Thank you for that. I personally believe that when you invest in a girl, she becomes the woman that will change the next generation. When you look back in history and you see the changes that have been made, you would recognize this fact and agree that for every change that has taken place, women have been pivotal in these changes. For me, in my journey, I suppose, a lot of what I do as an event designer or as a business strategist, sometimes I find myself in a man's world. So the question is, do I come in and pretend to be masculine, or do I come with my femininity to ask for a seat at the table? And I found that over time, if you do seek and ask for a seat at the table, you could be slighted. So I think by investing in yourself, so when you say invest in women, I would address that instruction to women. So I stand for investing in myself. And my mantra is for women to invest in women. So women to women, women to girls. And I found that over time in various sectors that I work in, there's been a rise in female leadership. There's been presence of women. You can see them at the forefront making changes and changing policy, changing direction. There's a lot that has taken place as a result of women being present and coming with their whole self, with all that they are as women. So I personally agree and would continue to advocate for women to women, women to girls. Let's enable ourselves as women to make sure that the change we seek comes from us. I believe in the power of one. If you want to see a change, you should be the change. And in my world, I have done that, I suppose.
Indeed. Well, you certainly can say that again, the power of one. And, if you want to, see change, be that change which you desire. I'm just looking at the theme on broad terms, and I cannot get over the fact that you say this is, in fact, a truth. So you have to ask questions as to how come it is that, something that is so obvious, something that we have seen work in many places. I think some people say you cannot clap with one hand, or the fact that, you cannot, if women and men, together make 100% of the population, and you have roughly half of them of one sex, how does any society hope to make progress when you consistently invest in just one half? And we've seen how when, both halves are invested in, the progress that we make in those places. So you have to ask, why is it that, obstacles still stand in the way of governments, and communities in investing in this other half in such a way that we can leapfrog progress? Why has it been so difficult in your own estimation?
I think the truth is, to change any conversation, you have to change the narrative. If the story is continued to be told by men, it's going to have a male perspective. So if we get to the point where women are in the position to be the ones telling the story, the narrative would change. So, for instance, this session, if I was being interviewed by a man, the conversation would be different. But because you're a woman, the conversation is going to be directed in a certain way. So if you look at these areas across the nation that we're talking about, if it's still fully led by men, or women are still in the minority, you don't need to guess, what the narrative is going to be like. So I think for the change to occur and to be sustained, it's not just a case of ticking a box because the SDGs say we should include women, or there should be diversity, or there should be inclusion. It should be a little bit more than that. It should be for women to rise to those positions where they are the ones telling the story, where they are the ones making the decisions, because only then would there be some sort of equity, some sort of equality, some sort of a balance. But until then, it's still going to be a man's story. It's still going to be, let's just make sure there's a woman in the picture, But we've gone past that. I think for us as women as well, when you are seeking that space, when you're going into a new world, it's important to do your research, do your due diligence, understand where you're going into. What are the rules of engagement here? And don't just expect that, because I'm a woman and they require women to be there, I qualify. No, understand what the rules of engagement are. Develop yourself to that point where you are speaking on authority, not because you're a woman, but because of your merits, because of your background, your expertise. You know what you're talking about. And I think until such a time as that is the norm, we will continue to have this conversation.
And it's interesting that, when you look at this theme, it speaks to, different levels of women. I'm sure largely now when you're speaking, I'm sure you're also thinking of many women such as yourself who have had the opportunity to have an education, and even operate in, in many privileged spaces of the corporate world. But when you go down the ladder, when you talk about women or young people in, say, primary schools, secondary schools, the fact that some never get an education, the fact that some at some point have to, the education is truncated, or that some people still do not see the value of having women educated, or some cultures still think that it is okay for women to be married off really young because that's what we are meant for. It does appear that there is no cadre, there is no strata which you apply this theme that it will not be relevant. I'm just looking at the different strata. When you look at it like that, where would you like us to apply this theme a lot more? Investing in women.
You're so right. You are on point to the max. Let's take it down to the girl child. Let's educate the girl child. I think if we can do that in 10 years' time, in 20 years' time, in 30 years' time, there will be a massive difference. I mean, I've traveled around and I go to countries, say, for instance, in Arab countries, say in UAE, in Egypt. There's a lot being done for women and their education. There's a lot. There's a whole emphasis, a national emphasis on women being educated, on girls being educated. And you see the shift. You see the difference. Because of that, on that level, from that primary school level where women and girls are given the chance, you'd see that in leadership, there's no strife. There are lots of equals. I'm not saying that it's perfect, but I'm saying if as a culture, we can start from that level, educate. If every child, every girl child is given the right to be educated, not as a privilege, but as a human right, the difference we would see over time would be amazing.
Well, I certainly will not be letting off my my colleagues, my male colleagues, off from this conversation. It'll be interesting to see what perspectives they bring into it. But, I'm also looking and thinking again that, sometimes all of this, I don't want to use the term liberation, but when we talk about investing in women, accelerating progress, it does come at a cost to society. Do you think? Do you think so?
It does come at a cost, but it's a cost that we have to pay. Because if we don't pay that cost now, it will be due in the future. We would remain where we are, and the progress is not complete. You cannot go with half yourself. Humanity is both male and female. We cannot succeed with half of ourselves. If we look at it to say we are both humans, we are. So it's two sides of the same coin. So to complete the wholesomeness of us as a nation, we need to address. It's not about talking about it anymore. It's about taking positive action. And this doesn't just sit with men, also sits with women. So I always say, make sure as a woman that you're looking at the girls that are coming behind you. You're looking at the woman that is sitting next to you. Because sometimes instead of waiting for men to wake up and smell the roses, we as women can be the change that we seek. Again, back to the power of one. Wherever you are, whatever platform you have, use it. Make sure that you're given the chance to another woman who is coming along. Make sure that you are leaving a legacy for your gender. Make sure that whatever you're doing, you bear in mind that it's not just about you, but you might be representing other women. That experience that company or that group might have of you is going to tell the story of how they think about women. So bearing that in mind, we go as a group, we go as a nation on our own, and we make humans complete. And I think if we all take on that responsibility to say, if it is to be, it's up to me, we've got this covered.
That's a really heavy responsibility for any woman to bear. The very knowledge that oftentimes when you walk into certain rooms, you're not just representing yourself, you're representing humanity, so to speak, and that how you carry yourself in a room in any circumstance will be how women in general are perceived. So it is a really heavy responsibility. But when you think about the cost, I mean, we have made many developments in society. Let us not kid ourselves. We've come a long way from when a lot of women didn't go to school to seeing many more women. In fact, yesterday was the conclusion of the call to bar. The call to bar ceremony here in Abuja. The chairman of the body of benches is a woman, an accomplished justice of the Supreme Court of Nigeria, Justice Mary Odili. And I'm sure if we were to look at the figures, we don't have the breakdown now, but we most likely will see an equal division between men and women graduating as lawyers. So we have made some progress in many instances, but of course there is so much more ground to be covered. I'm just wondering, as a society, what are some of the things that we've had to give and take? And do you think that on the long run, it has been worth it, especially when you look at the smallest units of society, the family? What are your thoughts on that?
You see, the family is the core of society. If the family breaks down, the society inevitably is broken down. And when you think about our roles as women, we actually have the power to shape society because we have the power to shape our families. So let's not kid ourselves. Let's not get lost in the whole mantra that, women are not being given a chance. So yes, that's all true. But like you're saying, a lot of progress has been made. So let's not run the script of yesteryears. Let's take account of where we are, how far we've come. Because sometimes we get lost in where we were, that we don't take stock of where we are. And you're very correct. There's been a lot of changes. There's been massive shifts in many industries. Let's celebrate that. And bearing that in mind, bring it down, like you're saying, to the core unit, which is the value in the family. As women, we're not contending, are we, when it comes to that? So if we get it right from that level, back to the power of one, back to if it's to be, it's up to you. You have got the power to influence a couple of children in your home, a couple of staff in your home, your husband, your spouse, whatever the case might be. Are you using it positively? Are you aware of the opportunity of that platform? Are you aware that that is a platform? And if you are, what are you doing about it? What are you doing thinking about tomorrow? Not just, the next 5 years, what school is my kid going to go to? What are they going to become a this or a that? If we bring it down to that micro level, as women, we have the power of influence. Let's use it.
I totally agree with you. Well, thankfully, I co-present this program with a very, very loud he for she's, and one of them is right there in Lagos. Ayo, with the purple heart. It's over to you now.
Well, thank you. Incidentally, you've asked quite a number of questions, Malpe, that all I just want to do is just follow up on some of them, really. So, well, Dr. Nakimio, good to know that at least there are shining lights all over the world, and thankfully, you are privileged to be one. Let me start with the final point you made from Malpe's question about the role of parents. Sometimes the pressure is coming from home, from that micro level. Because when we talk about all these inflation rates, macroeconomic indices and everything, it all comes down to the price of bread, price of tomatoes, price of corn in the market. And then there is usually that pressure from the home, from the mom or from the dad, that the girl child, in particular in most cases, should go and bring a husband. That pressure is, is sometimes very, very daunting and overwhelming. So what kind of messaging because it's one thing for the parents to tell you something because of the responsibilities that they have and the pressures that they themselves feel or brought themselves under. There's another issue of the girl child, the woman, the young lady, taking this messaging and owning it. What kind of messaging should this young lady, the potential woman of the future, be taking into her future from all of the issues that mommy or daddy may be raising today?
That's an amazing question. Thank you for that. I think it's back to what we were saying before. There is a narrative in our culture where women are made to become somebody's wife. I appreciate that. Now, I can't do anything about that narrative. I can't personally change that narrative. However, going forward, that girl child who has been told that her value lies in her getting married, if she sees it differently, she has the power to be the change that she seeks. So my response to that would be, what's the different narrative that you want to tell? Because you are going to become a woman, you are going to run your own home. Do you want to pass that culture on, or do you want to change it? You see, that narrative of we're groomed to be married is back to the same thing where we're being subjected. So that whole narrative on its own needs to be changed. So for those of us who know better, can we change that narrative? Because as soon as we do, the conversation would change. So let's not focus on what it was. From here on, what is it going to be? And that's down to you and I. What are we doing in our own families right now, at this level, where we are, in our families? What are we saying to our children today? Are we carrying on with what was said to us, or are we changing what we're saying to them? So I think if every girl child, every lady, every woman who's coming of age, focus on you. Who are you? Who are you and what are you offering? Yes, you've been told that this is what you're supposed to do, but do you know different? If you do know different, then be different.
Okay.
That's what I would say.
Well, let's stick with messaging for a bit.
Mm-hmm.
A good number of them, young men, young women, they live on the internet, particularly those they call the netizens. They literally live online. They see all kinds of things. To a large extent, all over the world, I hear the issues are the same. Economic challenges, inflation figures, we haven't quite recovered from COVID. And it doesn't look like it's going to get any better anytime soon in any part of the world that anyone would go to. So what should they be looking for? It's one thing to get messaging from parents and all. I've seen what you talked about, the theme of the celebration this year, to accelerate the progress. It's the individual himself or herself, well, in this case, herself, that should be looking out for something. What would you recommend that young ladies be looking for? Malpe took a news item this morning that widowhood cases on the front page of Nigeria's The Guardian newspaper, that widows are some of them are as young as 23. Now, that's definitely not the kind of statistic that we want to live, but it's our reality. What kind of messaging should young women be looking for that will at least insulate them from mentally from the vicissitudes that life will certainly bring?
It's going to be the same thing. Education, personal development. When we're young, we call it education. When we're older, as adults, we say personal development. Educate yourself. Fortify yourself with information. We have information overload. Select what is important. If you can educate yourself as a young lady, the world is your oyster. The limits that we place on ourselves based on our culture, based on our environment, they are real. However, the internet has given us access. You can, I'm here and I'm talking to you where you are. We're connected to 3 different locations connected via technology. Take advantage of technology. If you have access to it, use it wisely, not just to be a consumer of information, but the potential you carry as a young woman is immense. Use it profitably. Think about yourself and those coming after you. If we shift away from the selfishness of me, myself, and I, and consider who we are as women and what we have to offer, we would use our time profitably. We would seek to be the change. We would seek opportunities. We would seek to be solutions to the little thing that is around you. That litter that you found there, don't point at it, pick it up. It's just being the change that you seek. That would be what I would say.
One more thing from me. You know, we've talked about what the Nigerian needs to do, what the young lady needs to do, what the young woman needs to do, and all of that. But to accelerate this progress, one would need the influence of certain authority levels, government. And the route into government these days, if you're not a civil servant, is to get involved in democracy, active participation, be a member of a political party and all of that. But then you also know, I'm sure you are in touch with home enough to know sometimes the challenges that women have. So in terms of policy, in terms of inclusion, what would you suggest that the political parties factor into their selection processes so that there can be more inclusion, if they are serious about it, so that there can be more inclusion in of women in particular in government-related instances? This here is why. I've just been thinking that anytime we are talking about our lives generally, there's hardly any mention of children these days. But guess what? That's the domain of women. They will think about the children first before they even think about their husbands or even their own parents. So in order to be able to sustain development, consider the children, what would you suggest that the political parties be looking at, including women in the entire process, selection process, so that it can be, people can vote for them into elective offices?
Very important question. You see, the female agenda is the human agenda. Female agenda is not about women. It is about humans. It is important that, yes, even though we can say what we want politicians to do, like I said earlier, if there are no women on that table, the narrative is still going to be one-sided. So as politicians, wherever you are, whoever you are, whatever you're doing, you are related to a woman one way or the other. If nothing else, a woman gave birth to you. So if they don't have the understanding of what it is to be female, bring in those who do know. And like I said before, as women, you're correct. We have to aspire to go forward into political positions, because in order to make the changes, lasting, sustainable changes, women have to be in those positions as well. It's not going to be a man that will make the change that will favor a woman. Yes, we can have he, she's out there like yourself, but I would insist that it is important that we as women, we do our due diligence. look up the rules of engagement and join these political parties to see the lasting change that we see.
Well, good, Dr. Blessing, what would you consider as the one impediment to allowing this message resonate both among the male, even the female folk?
I would say the main thing is culture. It's how we've done it. It's how it is within organizations, within political parties, within industries. If we keep the narrative of this is how it's always done, why change it if we ain't broke? And all that story of it's a cultural thing. That's the main thing. But if we embrace change, and the change is difficult, but if we are change-oriented and want to see something different, we're going to have to do something different.
Oh, I certainly have to thank you. I mean, it gives us food for thought. Our culture, standing in the way. The culture is standing in the way of progress. I mean, we all learned that culture is dynamic in primary school. Isn't that what we learned? Well, we do hope that, culture will continue to prove itself dynamic, especially with regards to the second half of its, or shall I say, the equal half of its own population. Thank you so much for your thoughts this morning and for sharing them with us, Dr. Blessing Enakimo, CEO of the Blay Global and Director of Events, Brevity Anderson, joining us from Kent in the United Kingdom. Thank you so much once more, and happy International Women's Day to you.
Thanks for having me. Have a lovely day, guys.